This is what I'm going to talk about today, building disciplinary literacy, autonomy pathways in teaching and students' texts. As you said, I will start with to introduce myself. So I'm Camilla Håkansson. I come from Göteborg, that's the second largest city in Sweden. So it's on the west coast, as you see here on the map. And I'm a teacher, that's my background, for Swedish as a second language, and German. But I mostly, since a very long time ago, I work at the university with teacher education. So humanisten, that's where I work. And but a few years ago, I got the opportunity to do a PhD. So that's what I'm doing now. And and I found LCT through my supervisors, and luckily we have a LCT group in Göteborg, LCT West Coast, where we discuss a lot of things, and we also have the LCT Nordics up in Scandinavia, so that's a good thing, so you can meet people and talk about LCT. And the flowers are there because it's spring in Sweden now, finally. Okay, the outline for today. So first I'm going to tell you a bit about the school and the background where I've done my study. And then I'm going to talk about autonomy profiles in physics and something about autonomy plane and autonomy tours in physics. And then I'm also going to tell you a bit about Swedish, and if there are time, I will tell you about students' text. So let's see how it will work out. So this study focuses on teaching and students' text at the end of compulsory education in Sweden. The aim is to find out more about teaching of multilingual students in particular. In secondary school, disciplinary literacy is increasingly required. Students must learn subject-specific languages that characterize each subject. And one consequence of this is that all teachers need to be language teachers to some extent. However, teachers in subjects like physics do not always have the linguistic tools to teach disciplinary literacy. And language teachers, on the other hand, have knowledge about language and linguistic tools, but not always about the content knowledge to teach, disciplinary literacy in other subjects like physics. So one logical solution to this problem is to encourage collaboration between literacy teachers and subject area teachers. But there is a danger that the language teacher will be like an assistant teacher. Both teachers need to work together on equal footing to promote both language and subject content. And teaching needs tools for explicit teaching of disciplinary literacy, especially for students learning in a second language. So just a few words on disciplinary literacy. Research based on disciplinary literacy suggests that content knowledge in a subject and its literacy are intertwined rather than viewing literacy as a more general skill. So we have a quotation here. Disciplinary literacy refers to the idea that we should teach the specialized ways of reading, understanding, and thinking used in each academic discipline, such as science, history, or literature. Each field has its own ways of using text to create and communicate meaning. So I see language as a supportive resource for meaning making as well as learning. The focus is on the linguistic choices we make depending on what we are communicating about, who we are communicating with, and how we structure our communication. So this study is part of a doctoral project on disciplinary literacy on content knowledge in curricula, instruction, and student texts. It aims to improve understanding of how teachers, working primarily with students learning in an additional language, integrate subject-specific content and literacy skills in two different school subjects, physics and Swedish. By exploring this integration, the study aims to expand current knowledge of effective teaching practices for multilingual classroom. And my primary research question is for this, what I'm going to present today. How do teachers enable content knowledge and disciplinary literacy in the classroom when teachers of two school subjects work together? So a little bit about the school. The study was conducted in the school. It's located in a suburb of a larger city in Sweden. The compulsory school in Sweden lasts for 9 years, from 6 to 16 years. And this school has about 500 students and there are 80 employees. At the school, 70% of the students have a multilingual background. That means that they or their parents were born outside Sweden. In the Swedish education system, the final grades are awarded at the end of the 9th grade, which then are used to apply for secondary school, upper secondary school. And only 40% of the students in this school passed final grades in all subjects at the end of 9th year. And that's a very low figure. The average in Sweden is 76%. So my data collection, the study is a qualitative empirical study. So over a period of 5 weeks, lessons in 2 subjects were observed in 2 different 9th grade classes. The main focus of the observation was on the teacher's instructions, and all lessons were recorded and transcribed. In this presentation, I will use the transcribed data from the audio recordings of the lessons, and if we have time, the students' texts. So, this is a school project then on argumentative text and nuclear power. And there are 2 school subjects, physics and Swedish, which work together in this project over 5 weeks. And at the end, the students wrote a final assignment, and it's an argumentative text about nuclear power in which they should decide or argue for or against nuclear power. So the teacher worked together, but they have different targets with their lessons. The physics teacher works with the content about nuclear power and focuses on subject-related concepts. And the Swedish teacher works with the students' writing and focuses on the argumentative structure, but also on linguistic resources for the argumentation. So now we come to LCT. So I use autonomy and to understand the different ways that content knowledge and subject-specific literacy are incorporated in teaching. And I use autonomy to visualize the 2 teachers' different strategies. So in this study, I use positional autonomy to ask, does the lesson content have a stronger or weaker correlation with the teacher's target? Is the content derived from within the given context, or does it originate externally? And I use relational autonomy is the teaching purpose more or less aligned with the teacher's target? Is the purpose distinctive to this context? So in a teaching scenario where the students shall compose an argumentative text on nuclear power, the interplay between language and subject matter becomes intriguing. This is because the students need to simultaneously develop their understanding of nuclear power and their skill in writing argumentative text to successfully complete the task. And by tracking the autonomy pathway throughout the lesson, it becomes possible to observe the teacher's strategies for integrating subject content, but also to what extent language skills are integrated. And like many of you, I guess, I have constructed a translation.
Camilla, sorry, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Apologies, you're not even. I wanted, because I thought you would. I was waiting for the target. If you could go back to the slide before this one.
I will come to the target when I will explain the translation device, and then I talk about the target. So I think, okay, it's the next slide.
Good question, though, Jo. Good question.
Yeah. yeah, so this translation device, just a few words about the analysis, and yeah, more of a overview. So there is a translation device for each subject, one for physics and one for Swedish, and actually there's also one for the students' text, so there are 3 ones. And yeah, it's rather challenging, I think, to do the translation devices, but it's a good way to also it's necessary, of course, to go between theory and data, but also it's a good way to get to know your own data, I think. And then I have used Atlas T for coding data and to compare the codes. That was also helpful, I think. It's a qualitative study, but I've also done some quantitative study. So I have calculated the time spent in each code during the lessons, providing a macro perspective of the lessons, and I will show you this in a few minutes. So I use the autonomy plane to track the autonomy trips, and I use autonomy profile to get a meso perspective to visualize all the autonomy trips in a lesson. So now is the translation device. So this is the translation device for physics and positional autonomy. And it's based on the generic translation device from ATOM 2018. So in autonomy, the starting point is the target. And so the first level...
Camilla, watch out for hitting your mic wherever it might be. Where is your mic? Where is your mic, by the way?
Okay.
It sounds like you're rubbing it.
Okay. I hope, yeah, I will try to sit more straight maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's better. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, the target is the starting point for the translation device in autonomy. And for the physics teacher, the target content is the physics teacher's part of this project while she works with the Swedish teacher. And she wants to teach, or she wants to talk about her content. No, her content is nuclear physics. So that's her main target, main content. And non-target content is then outside her part of this working project. So it's everything else which has nothing to do with nuclear physics. So that's the two big, the first part, so target and non-target. And then, yeah, maybe I must, just a minute. And then the second level, we have core. It's a stronger positional autonomy with 2+. And here, the core content is then subject-related concept for nuclear physics. So that's really her main thing, what she wants to do in the teaching. And we have an example from the teaching here. Atomic nuclei that spontaneously disintegrate are referred to as radioactive. So we have subject-related concepts here. It's a bit tricky to have examples from the teaching because the codes are very long. So I have to shorten them very much to get them, to be able to show them here, I think.
What do you mean the codes are very long?
Because they are talking and yeah, okay, they can also be very short.
Oh, you mean the examples? The examples,
yeah, the examples will be so long because it's a code, maybe it's a part of a dialogue, and it's yeah, it's hard to fit in this table here. So, oh, okay. And the next level is ancillary, and you see it's only 1+, then it's a bit weaker than core, but still in target. And here we have other content within the work area of nuclear physics. So here there is an example from the teaching, and she says, and we can generate electricity using nuclear power. When we make electricity, and we will get into that more, radioactive substances remain that can cause damage. So here she is not using subject-related concepts also she's not defining subject-related concepts. She is talking about nuclear physics, but it's not so deep like in the core. And then for the non-target, we have associated weaker positional autonomy. That will be school subject-related content, but non-target and outside the physics content. So that could be, yeah.
Sorry, could I just ask? So there's another section of physics which is not nuclear physics but other physics. Yeah, where does that fit? Your definition there seems to suggest it would be non-target because it's outside the part of the physics teacher, but there's a sort of gap between your PA plus and your PA minus.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, maybe I should because it would be more in ancillary, so I must work on the definition there maybe, so that I can include also other parts of physics, because the target is really only physics. Also, it's nuclear physics, but all in physics. So the non-target must be outside physics. So I must maybe clear that. Yeah, good.
Okay, thanks.
You can draw the line, I mean, at nuclear physics rather than all of physics. You have to make that kind of call as to what you want to, what makes the most sense as to whether it's part of the target or non-target. But once you do that, then that makes sense. That's a good call, actually, from Paul there. There's, that nuclear physics isn't all of physics, is it? So there could be other physics stuff, and whether you put it in plus or minus, I mean, you'll have to make that call.
Yeah, that's right. I started out with the curriculum, actually, for physics as a target, but there is a small part in the curriculum that is about language, and I wanted to be able to see in my analysis how she is using language and also how she integrates language in the physics. So that's why I didn't have the whole curriculum here as a target.
Sorry, before you go on, can I ask about that then? Because I was interested about how you decided what the target was. Is it kind of an institutionally defined target, or is that the individual teacher's kind of conception of what the target of their teaching is?
The target is from the teacher. It's the teacher who specify what is the target for this this project that they are doing. So, I mean, if you take the curricula, it could also be that as the teacher, of course, says that her teaching builds on the curriculum, or syllabus, maybe that's a better word, I'm not sure. So the target how to get the target is that it's from the teacher's perspective, really. What she means is the target for her teaching. And she wants to provide knowledge about nuclear physics in this working, in this project, in this 5-week project.
So did you got that from a kind of data collection? As part of your data collection, you established what the target was through an interview or something, was it?
Yeah, that's right. Interview, and through what she is saying at the first lesson of this project. And there she's also stating what this is going to be about. So it's her wording.
Okay, great.
Mm.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm also struggling here a little bit. Maybe I should wait until I see what PA minus is, but how the teacher would see something about the capstone man being associated, not target for this lesson, of course, but associated with nuclear physics, as opposed to being unrelated.
Yeah. Yeah, I can explain that. Here in associated, she used other school subject related content to in her teaching as a content from other school subject, and that could be history. And one part of the teaching is she's talking about carbon 14 method and mummies, where you can decide how old a mummy is, and that has something to do with how these and so she takes this example. Have you heard of the capstone man? He was discovered in Sweden, buried in a swamp. He has not vanished, even his clothing remains intact. So she's talking about this Swedish mummy, and so she takes a content from history and brings it into her teaching about physics. So I think that she is the purpose. Well, this is just only the positional autonomy, so it's just the content. But the purpose was to teach physics. So it would be in the introjected code. She used the content from history, but the purpose was to say something about physics. So if you bring them together with the relational autonomy here, maybe you will get the connection to physics. Is it okay? Did you understand me, Lee? Yeah.
I do
Okay,
unassociated, and then it'll help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the unassociated is then other content without reference to school subjects. So and there are a lot of things that can be PI minus. She's it's often in the beginning of the lesson, and here she says, "Oh, it's surprisingly hot today, and now there's going to be a thunder. I'm a little nervous because I have a son who sits in a sailboat out on the water." So she's talking about something quite different, and just to make a good atmosphere, I think, in the classroom too. When they start, you can't start with physics directly. She wants to start with something else, and so she's talking a few minutes about her own life at the beginning. Yeah, okay. So, and this is then the translation device for relational autonomy. And here, I think the target purpose for the teacher then is to teach nuclear physics. That's her target. And the non-target purpose is to teach or talk about other content. So for relational autonomy plus core, the purpose is to deepen the target, also the introduction and explaining of subject-related concepts. And ancillary, the purpose is to teach nuclear physics, but without in-depth study. It's not to define or explain in deep what nuclear physics is. It's more about talking about the use, maybe, or something like that. And then, like I said, associated, then the purpose is to teach school-related content outside physics. It could be if the purpose was to teach history, but as you already heard, the purpose when she did this example about the capstone man, maybe I shouldn't have it that. Oh, I realize that now. The example is not so good here. Sorry about that. So And then we have the unassociated. The purpose is to teach or talk about other content without reference to school subjects. So relational autonomy, because it's about teaching, I think that positional and relational autonomy, I mean, the purpose is to teach the content, which you see by the positional autonomy. So they stick a lot together. So, findings. And it's a work in progress. So, do interrupt. It's very good for me. Yeah. So, first, I would like to show this macro perspective where I have counted the time that the teacher spent in each code in every lesson. And here you see 8 lessons of physics. There were more lessons, but I think this is enough to show what I mean. And you can also see that I have colored the plane here. And I think it's just a very clear pattern that she spent a lot of time in the sovereign code. It's the blue here. And the orange one is projected code. It's not so much. And in the projected code, the lessons are about physics. We have a stronger positional autonomy for the content, but a weaker relational autonomy. So the aim of the lesson is outside the target. So this will be when she is talking about she's teaching language but talking about physics. So she used physics to teach language. That will be the projected code, and I will show that in a minute more about that.
Sorry, Camilla, I dropped, oh, sorry, where we go. I dropped out for a minute or two, so I'm sorry if you've repeated this. What is number 1 to 8?
Yeah, it's the lessons. It's
okay, eight different lessons.
8 different
Thank
lessons.
You.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So the gray.
Hello, puppy. Hello.
Sorry.
Oh, puppy.
Oh.
Sorry, that Sharon's iPhone keeps unmuting, and then suddenly you're hearing her talking to somebody. Don't worry.
Okay. And then they have the interjected code. It's the gray ones. You can see she's spending some time in there. And there's also exotic code. That's the yellow one. And that's when she's using content outside physics, and the purpose is also outside the target. So, and as you can see, we have a bit more projected code in lesson number 7. So this is the one I would like to talk more about today. And as I said, I also use autonomy profiles. So, and I use them to get an overview over the lesson, because I think when I use, it's difficult sometimes when you do the plane and you see all the pathways, and it will be a lot of lines all over the plane. So I thought about this with a profile that they could, just like for semantics, we could see over time what happens. So that's what I use the profiles for. And in a lesson, here we have physics lesson number 5. There are normally about 2, 3, 4 trips during a lesson. And I think its trip starts when a new activity begins. So, and usually that is the teacher talks about a new concept, or it's time for a group activity or so. That's the start of a trip. And a trip ends when a new activity begins. So it may end with a summary from the teacher, but it's not always the case. so I've done these profiles for the lessons and compared them. And as you can see here, it maybe takes a while to understand the profiles, but the blue ones is positional autonomy and the red ones are relational autonomy. And you see the plus plus and plus minus 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 at the left. And at the bottom, at minus minus, there are, you see that positional autonomy and relational autonomy, they are together. And it's the exotic code, actually. So you can see that several trips starts in the exotic code at the bottom. And it's like a stepping stone to the trip. Because you, if you're teachers, you know this, I think. Because if you want to start something, you just don't start with your PowerPoint or something. You always do something else before, a short, maybe just a minute, talking, making a joke or something. It's like a stepping stone, I think, for the trip. I'm not quite sure if stepping stone is the right word, but it's so they start the trip like this. So, and if you compare the lessons with profiles, you get to the overview over the lessons. And at the left we see physics lesson 5, and a lot of the physics lessons look like this. And you can see that the dots are a lot in plus or in plus. That means she's spending a lot of time in the sovereign code. But physics lesson 7 is a bit different. And this is a lesson where she decided to integrate more language to do other things than just nuclear physics. And as you can see, maybe more at the end, about 30-40 minutes there, there are, maybe I can point, here. So you can see that the blue ones, that's positional autonomy, also the content about physics, it's in plus, so she's talking about physics, but the red ones are jumping up and down, and that's when she is using physics to teach language. So we will look at that now. So I think this is a lesson with potential for disciplinary literacy. And like in the translation device, all my examples are a bit shortened here because they say more than I can just show here. The teacher says, does anyone have an argument for or against nuclear power? And the student said then, nuclear power stations do not emit carbon dioxide emissions during their lifetime. Carbon dioxide emissions. Then we develop this answer based on what we do in physics. This is the first clause. The second clause could be no carbon dioxide emissions. Why is that good? And the student, because it has no impact on the environment. It has no impact on the climate. No, but how? Because that's the way it will be like. There will be no climate change. And then the teacher, no carbon dioxide emissions means that we are not contributing to the greenhouse effect, which increases global warming. 3 concepts in the same sentence. That's good, isn't it? So, in this example, the teacher elaborates the student's answer towards a more developed answer, which is the way arguments are expressed in science. She does this by asking elaborating questions that lead the student further. Why is that good? She wants the students to continue the sentence. She's asking for a reason. But how? Also a question that leads the student further, that requires a method. And finally, she points out that they have used 3 different concepts in an in-depth subject-specific language. So I think here she is in the projected code. It's a stronger positional autonomy and weaker relational autonomy, since the purpose is not to teach physics content, but how to write or formulate arguments in physics. Yeah, okay. So, and a bit later, there is another example, and here the teacher takes an autonomy tour using an example of a student outside the target in the exotic code. First, she strengthens the relational autonomy. She goes to the introjected code, and then she strengthens the positional autonomy and returns to the projected code. So, and I read it here. Think about it if you have arguments. Think about why. What does it lead to? Does anyone have any other arguments for or against? So she's again in the projected code. And the student says, it's a bit, how do you put it, working conditions. The risk for those who dig, bad working conditions. The teacher said, that's not a scientific argument, I would say. Yes, now we see. The interest in profit means that working conditions are harsh. So she goes here to the exotic code. Positional and relational autonomy is getting weaker. This is a content and purpose that is outside the target of physics. And then the teacher said, how can we change this to make it scientific? So by saying that, I think she strengthens relational autonomy by asking how they can turn this argument into science. And the student said, if you're right, it could be dangerous for, yes, exactly. So I start talking about the body, a human being, then it becomes scientific. So here she strengthens positional autonomy. The content is now physics. The purpose of her teaching is still argument writing, so it's weaker relational autonomy. So she's made a tour. And
Camilla,
yeah,
sorry, I just want to check here. In your translation device, if I remember, the PA plus, you had that as being related to nuclear science, not science generally or physics generally. So I'm just checking, how do you know, so I start talking about the body, a human being. How does she relate that to natural science? Because I can see she's linking it back to the subject, but not particularly the topic of nuclear science. That's not clear to me.
No, it's more science. I think you're right there. Because she tries to make a difference. Here she wants to make she wants the students to see the difference between a more economic or social argument and a scientific argument. So
yeah, that makes sense to me.
So I think maybe I must, in my translation, because I have included it in science, and you mean because it's not nuclear science in particular, it could not be stronger positional autonomy. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Maybe picking up on what Paul said earlier, the PA plus might be, you know, where nuclear physics or whatever is linked to other science topics, might be you know, then this would fit absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's something to just think about.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that answers your question about where, you know, I asked, where does it go? You're using it naturally, that not just other physics, but also other science or other natural science is going in the sort of associate. Sorry, I'm getting the terminology wrong. Is PA plus RA plus? So that's the way you're using it. So that sort of answered your question. Even though you didn't write it in that translation device in your head, it looks like that's what you'd set the translation device to be.
Yeah, okay, I must think about. And
But I just to add to this, this and this is a really nice example of how a translation device is developed and keeps developing until you end up publishing the thing or whatever, and even after that might develop, because you know, you kind of get, it's not something where some people misunderstand it as being something you have before you start. Sometimes you can take inspiration from other people and have a general idea of what it is, but it gets changed all the way through, back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. You know, you might want to try that. You might want to go back and reshape that so that the PA plus is not just physics or nuclear physics. Or you might then, if you try that, you might then think, oh, that doesn't really feel right. And you keep going back and forward and in discussion with other people as well as to what makes the most sense. It's all about trying to see. I mean, these visualizations like pathways and profiles and so on, they're simply to see patterns that wouldn't otherwise be clear if they weren't visualized in analyzed data. And in terms of what's plus or minus and so on, that's really all about trying to figure out what is that target that you, when you feel that she's back on where she wants to be or where her main thing is or what makes it distinctive, you then, you know, you get better sense of what it might, you know, what that plus and minus might be. It's not always like as clear cut as you might think. Sometimes you do shift it a bit because you know it feels right that she's come back. If this ends up being where you think, oh right, yeah, she's come home here, then you do want it to be PA plus, which means your translation device will then adjust, because the translation device is simply there so other people can use it to analyze your data.
I'll just say as well, this is really interesting because it's exactly the process I went through with autonomy, where I started off thinking my plus was all computer science, and that what I ended up with was PA was computer science, but PA plus was other science and STEM related to computer science. So I kind of did what it seems like you're doing. I started thinking it was very small and ended up widening it, and I did the same thing. I widened it to the whole of science by the time I'd finished the translation device or finished the analysis, and I kept tweaking the translation device all the way through. But that's exactly the movement I went through on my translation device too.
It really takes a long time, and I have discussed this with a lot of people already, but I think it's so it's really good, every comments here. I think, thank you a lot. But I think I should think about that, about widening it, it was this problem with the language part that actually, because I wanted to show, to see, I didn't want language to get mixed up with science. That was I think the language is outside her target. Here she is trying to use language or to teach language, which is a good thing. But so I want to make clear the difference between when she's teaching language and when she's teaching physics. So that was very important here. And also I think it's interesting that at first I thought, okay, sovereign code is the best one, but now I think no, it's not like that. It's you need all the codes in teaching. So it's not
sorry,
just...
I have to. Yeah, I just want to emphasize that. That's such a good point, because like I used to have these arguments with a very senior figure in another field who seemed to assume that the sovereign code was where you want to be all the time. And if you stay in the sovereign code only, it is highly likely that your teaching is going to be incredibly boring and unengaging and off-putting, because you know, you are just staying in one place the whole time in terms of what you're talking about, for what purpose. And a classroom just it shouldn't be like that, really. It should be a bit more dynamic and, move in and out and bring things in to support what you're teaching and so on. So, yeah, there is no one right code. There's no codes better than any other. They all have their own benefits and limitations. And same thing with pathways, it's like they're not, there's going to be a benefit to a one-way trip found somewhere, for some reason. So, yeah, I just want to cheerlead that point to say, yeah, no code is better than any other. It depends what you're trying to do. Yeah.
So let me just bring in a little anecdote. Yesterday, I was introducing autonomy to my final year students, and we were having a discussion about exactly this. So this is about 600 fourth years, about isn't sovereign the best? So I said, well, it's like going to an action movie, and if it's all just high energy all the time, and there's not this comic relief or this moments of quiet, it's like overwhelming. Or if it's a kind of a drama, if there aren't, you need some kind of variety to get the momentum over, some kind of humorous, I don't know, some joke to break the tension, and that sort of thing. And I said it works the same in the lesson. If you just stay in the sovereign all the time, it can get very, really tedious. So that was the analogy that I just used in my in my lecture yesterday.
Yeah.
I can just add something on that note. It's really interesting. But I'm thinking about my daughter and her sort of music. I know it's not physics, but music learning. So when she sort of explains what's happening in the classroom, it's, and obviously I'm not a music expert, but it looks like it's sort of oscillating, especially music theory, around sovereign, and it's simply not even boring or whatever, but it's just simply not. She can't succeed because she doesn't get it. She is not. She's not building knowledge basically in that sense, and I wonder, if we could sort of analyze her lessons when she's being taught music theory. It's just not working for her. It might be working for some students, but it's not working for her.
That's such a good point, Joe. If you don't go out, there's no way in for people if they can't, if they're not already inside.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
So
if they're not already inside, so the students sort of at higher levels, right, who have been studying it for years and years, and they kind of cross that threshold. They get it. They get the 9s and the 7s and whatever, the higher grades. But for her, it's just not a no-go place. So that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to say, Camilla, is I really like the idea of you using. I think it's a really interesting idea, and maybe I should use it for my own kind of stuff as well. But you put the language, so the other subjects almost on the same plane as the physics kind of teaching. So you're still using, so the target is still the same as you had before, and now you're just plotting language on that just to see where it falls, like you said. And I wanted to thank you for that, because it gives me more to kind of think about. Thanks.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, I go on a bit. Let's see. As I said, I had one target one translation device for physics and another for Swedish, because they have different targets. They are working together, and so the final assignment for the students is to write this essay about nuclear physics and argument to make an argumentative text about nuclear power. That's a final assignment. So it's a cooperation, but I was a bit disappointed, I must admit, when I did the observation, because they are not so close together. They say they work together, but they have different targets. So for the Swedish teacher, this is on the autonomy plane for the Swedish teaching, and I thought I don't show you the translation device, I just show very short here, the targets. So for PA++ and R, also the sovereign code, the core actually, and when you are deep in the sovereign code, the Swedish teacher has a target content and a purpose to teach and deepen knowledge about argumentative writing. So he is here, it's disciplinary literacy actually for the Swedish part. And ancillary would be then weaker, a target content and purpose, but weaker, and that will be more general school literacy. And if you have the opposite, a weak positional and relational autonomy, there will be school subject related content but non-target and outside the Swedish content. That would be if she or he was using content from physics and teaching physics. And of course there are also other content and purpose without reference to school subject. And for the interjected code, non-target content but a target purpose, using physics to teach argumentative writing. That would be in the interjected code for the Swedish teacher. And projected code, target content and non-target purpose, so using content from Swedish for a non-target purpose. And I didn't really see that in my observations. An example would be, for me as a Swedish teacher, I would say if you use a novel or something in the Swedish teaching, but you are teaching history, that would be projected code, I think. But it didn't happen in this project. So this, I'm going to show you one example from the Swedish lesson. It's number 2. And yeah, it's the autonomy profile. And I'm going to talk about this part. And perhaps you know the teaching and learning cycle. That is, the Swedish teacher works with this to a certain extent. And during this part of the lesson, he and the students work with the third part, which is the joint construction of a text. The students and the teacher formulate a text together, an argumentative text. The students make suggestions, and the teacher asks elaborating questions to push the writing forward and to deepen and to develop the language. So in the profile you can see positional autonomy, the blue ones, and it's alternating between plus and minus, while relational autonomy remains in plus. And that means a change between interjected and sovereign code. And so, but I will start and show it on the plane instead. So we have here the teacher building knowledge about argumentative writing. So the teacher said, let us take this headline called Flight, a Necessary Evil. Let us now think together as one person. So he starts talking about flight. So it's the content outside his target, but his purpose is to teach argumentative writing. And he says then, we will write an introduction. And then he says something more about the introduction. So we will write an introduction that encourages reading. So we want to surprise the reader. And here he goes up to the sovereign code, to the ancillary, because he's talking and explaining and saying something about how to write an introduction. And then the students suggest a sentence, and the teacher say, I read out the sentence. Flying has a large and positive impact on the Swedish economy in terms of exports and imports. Sweden is dependent on exports. So here I think when he reads the sentence from the student, he uses this content that is outside his target, but it's a purpose of teaching argumentative writing. So he goes down to interjected. And it goes on like this. The teacher says, maybe we should use and this suggestion brings the content back on target, aligning with the purpose of the lesson. And then a student proposes and requires fast transport. And this suggestion briefly leads the lesson to the introjected code, a non-target content. And then the teacher steering the conversation back says, and then I think the introduction is almost complete. We just need an effective conclusion for our thesis. And by doing this, the teacher strengthens both positional and relational autonomy, refocusing the discussion on the task at hand, finishing the introduction and formulating the thesis of the argumentative text. So, and then the lesson continues in the same way, return trips between introjected and sovereign code, but it's ancillary. So he is, in a way, connecting non-target content and knowledge about argumentative writing. But very important, he is not using content from physics. If he had done that, it would have been the same shifts, but it would have strengthened the understanding of how the two subjects are connected for the students. Yeah. So to sum up the teaching, I thought I'd do that now and see if we can say something about the student's text. So I think the result points to the complexity of teaching. There are a lot of things going on in the classroom all the time. The teachers focus on the target for the subject and lead the lesson towards the target. Interruptions to the activity or questions from the students can distract the lesson, but the teachers in the study remains focused on the target. And we see this in the constant return trips to the sovereign code. So I think the result shows that the teacher build up content knowledge about the subject, especially the physics teacher, but that the integration of other subjects into the collaboration takes place only to a small extent. The integration of disciplinary literacy in physics is made visible by trips to and in the projected code, and the autonomy pathway showed how little time is used for language integration in physics. And she doesn't explicitly explain what in the language lead to an argument in physics. She shows it in the text written on the board, and the students are given examples, but they are not given explanation of what makes this an argument. So, and you can see that the physics teacher is not a language teacher. And in the Swedish lesson, returns between sovereign and introjected code show that the teacher uses non-target content to illustrate how knowledge of literacy can be used in argumentative writing. And by referring to the target, the teacher made linguistic resources explicit at the text level. But it does not really deepen the linguistic understanding of the writing. As the return trips are between introjected and ancillary and not core, linguistic resources are not made so explicit to the students at a deeper level. I mean, he had been able to say something about how to formulate an argument, formulate a thesis in different ways, for instance, or how and show how paragraphs are constructed, but he doesn't do that. So I think here we can see that it would have been a good thing maybe to get into the core. But there wasn't, he didn't do that, and maybe it was also no time for that, I'm not sure. So I think the collaboration has the potential to build up not only subject knowledge, but also disciplinary literacy. But teachers need to become more aware of the importance of integrating the other subject so that students understand how language and subject are connected. And to integrate the other subject, the teachers shifted codes in different ways. As the physics teacher made trips involving projected code. She kept the physics content, a stronger positional autonomy, but weakened the relational autonomy. Her purpose was not to teach language. Her purpose was to teach language, of course. The Swedish teacher made return trips to the introjected code. He weakened his positional autonomy, the content, but had a stronger relational autonomy. So his purpose was still to teach argumentative writing. So this integration takes place in different codes, but that depends on, because they have different targets. His target is more connected to the teaching to a purpose, maybe you can say that, and her is more connected to the content.
Excuse me, Camilla. Can you?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Can I ask a question? Because it was here at the end that I was so the last example where it was sort of one line, that was the Swedish teacher, and the other examples were physics teachers. It was just because I was thinking in a broader context, all these different models for the way two teachers from two different subject areas can work together. Are they in the class at the same time, or are they one? Is the Swedish teacher alone with the students, and then the physics teachers is alone with the students, or are they there at the same time? Maybe you said something about that, or
no, I don't think I said that, but they are not in the same classroom. They have a few lessons together, but most of the time they teach separately. So they are in different classrooms. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
so I would just
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, so I need to put a battery in. No, but sorry, I would just say that as a teacher working with this kind of collaborations, your conclusion here, or your ongoing, makes sense, because for me that's the most difficult part as a teacher. If you want to take on subject literacy and you're not a physics teacher yourself, then you really have to be in close contact, because of course in some way the Swedish teacher lacks the knowledge of the physics. So I was just wondering, are there any, I mean, to show, or I mean, to develop the potential of working together, it would just be so interesting to see what do teachers do if they actually teach this together. I mean, so it's just, it makes sense, and in a way to develop these kind of teachers needs to come together, because it's too difficult to develop as a literacy teacher. It's too difficult to develop knowledge of physics on your own. So it would just be interesting if you had any kind of data that, for me that would be, I won't say anything.
Yeah, I also think that it would be a good thing to, if they, because they need each other. The physics teacher need the language teacher, and the Swedish teacher need the physics teacher. So if they want the students to do these sort of assignments, and I know that we maybe are running out of time now, so maybe I should not, or how is it? Should I say something about the students' texts? Carl, do you think that? Or shall I go on for a bit?
I
can show you
yeah, I mean,
something.
I was just thinking about the use of two fields coming together. As
okay.
Have you come across the work of? I mean, I'm sure you have, but the work of Ken Tan and colleagues.
I have.
Yeah, and I was also thinking of the work done by science educators at Stellenbosch, where they've often worked with sort of like disciplinary literacy alongside science teachers. I'm sure you've come across that as well.
Thank you.
But if you haven't, those guys are really lovely. Sort of Marnel Mouton and others at Stellenbosch are really great people. But yeah, it's often about this trying to do one thing through another thing. You know, like teaching about a language through a topic, or and I also know that Leah here, if she's still here, is doing something along those lines as well. Yeah, there she is. Nodding away. Yeah, there you go. Is also doing that sort of thing with, you know, content integrated into something else. So yes, this is sort of becoming a kind of a theme across various areas, where we can use autonomy to look at how something can be done through another thing. I mean, like, for example, Paul's teaching computer studies through the use of magic as well. You know, it's becoming a bit of a theme. So I encourage everybody who's doing it to contact everyone else who's doing it, because you can all learn from each other.
Okay. Yeah.
Camilla, I have one little question. Do you know if those two teachers designed those lessons that they teach separately together?
Yeah. No, the lessons they designed separately, but the project as a whole they designed together. And I really think that was it was the first time that these two teachers worked together. And so it would be interesting to go back to the school, because I think that they do this kind of project again and again in the school. So it would be interesting to know what had happened if they have developed it a bit more, because it's really separately now that they are working. And I think that they need a closer cooperation. They need to see more of each other's work to see where they can fill in with, where the Swedish teacher can come in with his knowledge and the physics teacher can come in with her knowledge.
But you shared your findings with them, right?
Not yet, but I will. Yeah.
That'll be interesting when you've got that, when you have that conversation, right, about, you know, potentially your recommendations or how they take it. Yeah, thank you.
So I go on then with the students' text. It's just a couple of slides, we saw that in both Swedish teaching and physics teaching, we saw that it's not enough to concentrate the teaching only to the sovereign code if you want to integrate physics and language. And I think for cumulative knowledge building and for the writing assignment, the students need to understand how the two subjects are interrelated, and how the students integrate knowledge from the two school subjects in the text and combine the physics content with the purpose to persuade, to make arguments for or against nuclear, can, I think, be traced by an autonomy analysis as well. So the research question for this part is then, how do the students integrate knowledge from the two school subjects? So they must use content about nuclear power, that's knowledge from the physics teaching, and they must use an argumentative purpose, knowledge from the Swedish teaching. So there is a new autonomy plane and translation device. The target here is the writing instruction, which was written by the teachers. And it's a very short one. It's write an argumentative text for or against nuclear power. So I've taken this one as the starting point, as the target for the student's text. I saw that also in Jackson, I think, that he did that. So I tried that. The target is the writing instruction. And so I will show this very simple on the plane, I hope. Let's see. So we have in the sovereign code, that's when they are writing about nuclear power, and they are writing in a persuasive way, they are making an argumentation. And the opposite will be to use a content outside the writing instruction, in this case, wind power. And they are not using a purpose to persuade, but to do something else in the text, maybe explain or describe something. In the projected code, it will be a content connected to the target, nuclear power, and relational autonomy then that is non-target, also explain or describe, not argument. And in the interjected, we would have a non-target content, wind power, for example, but the purpose would be argumentation. And as you can see, we have only plus or minus here. So I have not used core, ancillary, and so the second level in this translation devices, just the two, because I think I don't need more here. And maybe I should explain the relational autonomy a bit more. It's connected to the Swedish teaching. Therefore, I use linguistic aspects to code stronger or weaker relational autonomy in the text. So I'm looking at how do the students express argumentative purpose. They do that often by using mental processes like think or mean, or they value something. So, yeah. Okay. And so I will show you two texts, and it's in Swedish. I know you can't read it, but I will show you something else here. So we have two texts. It's two paragraphs. At the left we have text 3, and at the right text 19. So in this first text, text 3, the students starts the paragraph writing about nuclear power, and in an argumentative way. In the middle, he is writing about wine power, and still in an argumentative way. And then he ends with nuclear power, also with argumentative way. So there is a movement in this paragraph. In the other, the students is also writing about nuclear power, and also in an argumentative way, but it's the only thing this student do. And here I have the two texts, the whole text. You can also see that text 19 is shorter. And I have highlighted in blue the sovereign code, and in gray the interjected code. So in text 3, we can see that there are variation. The students write about nuclear power, but also about other things, wind power or water power or something like that. In text 19, the text is almost only blue, and there's a small part there with gray, where the student writes something about wind power. So, and if you look at the profile instead, we can see that text 3, and here I must explain, it's still blue positional autonomy and red relational autonomy, but the dots are mostly a sentence. It is, I wanted to show the text, to show the whole text, and then it's quite an easy way to take it in sentences. Of course, the code can shift in the middle of a sentence, so sometimes it's just a clause or something, but most of the time it's a sentence, but every dot is a sentence. So, and as you can see, the text 3 has a greater variation in the text, but the text 19 has more like a flat line. And you see here also that the text 3 has a high grade and text 19 a low grade. And you could think that text 19, it's everything in plus. So she or he is writing about nuclear power, and it's in an argumentative way. Yeah, it is. She's following the instruction, but it's not enough for this kind of writing assignment, because in an argumentative text you have to compare something. If you write about nuclear power and you want to persuade everyone to think that nuclear power is the best, you must compare that to something else that is not so good. And that's what text 3 is doing here. He is writing for nuclear power and compare it to winecraft and watercraft that this student thinks is not so good. But the student in text 19 is only writing about nuclear power. And so it's it doesn't work really as an argumentative text. And of course, there are also a lot of other problems that makes this text to get a low grade. It's not just how she's using the content and purpose, but I think it's interesting that they get so different here. So something about the students' use here, or students' text. I think the analysis illustrates the students' use of knowledge from physics and Swedish. We can also see that the students do what the teaching has focused on, subject-related concepts from the physics teaching and the global text structure from Swedish teaching. But the analysis also shows that students with well-functioning text with higher grades uses the content in another way. There is a variation in their text. They use non-target content to compare nuclear power with other energy sources. And well-functioning texts also connect to target content and target purpose by strengthening positional autonomy and relational autonomy. Again, the texts get more cohesive, and you can see this by return trips in the texts. For more complex text, the students need, for instance, it's not enough just to make an argument or to augment. And it's not enough just to use linguistic resources to write argumentative. You also have to explain or describe things, and that's important for a more complex text. And that will also get a variation then in the profile. And of course, you can also see the importance of the writing instruction. It was a very short writing instruction, and if the writing instruction had been longer, I mean, if I have the writing instruction as the target, that also gives you the profiles in a way, I think. So yeah, maybe I would like to discuss that if you think it's a good way to use the target, use the writing instruction as the target for the analysis of texts. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, my last slide then. I think some implications. I think autonomy could be a useful didactic tool for teachers and in the teacher education. Autonomy helped me to see what's going on in the classroom, and I would now very much like to try to make this visible for teachers. And I can think of 4 aspects here. I think don't be afraid of taking an unknown pathway, leaving the sovereign code, but you also need to come back. Students who learn in a second language have a double challenge. They must master the content and build up knowledge about the content, and at the same time they must learn the language. For teachers, this means that they need to integrate content and language in the teaching. You need to get out of the sovereign code as a subject teacher, but of course also come back again to your target, and I think autonomy can make this integration visible. For language teachers, to deepen the language instruction and to make the language explicit to the student, you may need shifts to core and not just ancillary, as we saw that in the Swedish teaching. And the integration of language in content subjects, the physics teacher did that to a small extent, but she did it. She opened up for literacy in her teaching, and I think that's a good start. And the pathway could visualize how she did it. So, thanks for listening.
Thanks, Camilla.
Yeah.
We've got like a couple of minutes if anybody wants to add a comment or jump in or say something. Just jump in, unmute yourself. Say whatever.
Massive thank you, Camilla. Massive, sorry, Carl. Massive thank you. It's really a lot to kind of think about. I was thinking of integrating different subjects together. I was thinking of your autonomy plane. Would it make sense? I don't know. Thinking of designing such a session. So teachers working together, number one, on the design. I'm thinking what would happen, right? And then thinking, okay, sovereign, so the target being teaching nuclear physics, the nuclear physics for the purpose of learning nuclear physics. And then I was thinking of introjected, should the language be there, or literacy teaching for the purpose of learning nuclear physics? Just thinking out loud, please ignore if it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you have a collaboration, if you have the two teachers working together, you will need another translation device. You will have another target, I think, if they are really working together. So if the target is physics content, as a positional autonomy physics, and relational autonomy is language, you could think that, I guess. The purpose, you use physics, the target is to use physics to teach language, so the language in physics. Yeah, in that case it would be in the introjected, I guess. But for the physics teacher, language was not the main thing. That's why that was the projected code for me in my data. But I think as a tool to showing it to teachers, I would like to. I haven't done anything about that yet, but I would really like to make it a tool to be able to use it in my own teaching and in my with my in teacher education or so, because I think it's so. It makes it so clear if you have the plane, and at least it's clear to me. I'm not sure if it's clear to the teachers, but that you see that you have to move. You can't just. It's not just your subject that's important. In physics, you need language. You need language to explain physics. You need it, and you can't talk about physics. Because it's such a complicated subject. You need also a complicated and explicit language. So you need a specific language to talk about physics. And the physics teacher doesn't really, she knows the language, but she doesn't have the tool. But she open up and try to make something with language in her teaching. And I think if you can show that you must move out of your subject a bit if you want to integrate language. You must move, and I think maybe you can do something with the plane in that way, and also do it very simple. I think that's the key here, and not talk so much about positional and relational autonomy, I guess. And if you're talking to people outside LCT,
well, contents and purposes is simple enough.
Yeah.
So, Camilla, there's just something that I've been thinking about. Just firstly, I think that the way that you showed very, very clearly the language teacher's purpose, the physics teacher's purpose, and the student's text purpose and targets in each of those was so clear and so accessible. So I really enjoyed that. The one thing that just kept coming to my mind is, an argumentative essay is not always part of the kind of the competences and the skills that the linguistic skills that you want to build up in a physics subject. So it really made sense to me then that was located in the language teacher's courses and subjects and lessons, and not in the physics. And just something that, if you're thinking about kind of ideas for further studies or things later to do, one of the things that kept coming to me is that one of the things that you do as a physics teacher using language is writing up research reports or, your observation reports of experiments and so on. And that is the kind of the language that is the everyday language, the way that they, using texts in physics. So it would just be interesting to me if ever, the language teacher wanted to do kind of observation reports or something like that, that would be a natural match to be located, not just using physics content somewhere else, but actually writing in the physics lessons itself. It would be kind of that kind of writing might be more of the kind of the target writing in the physics course itself. So that was just a point that I just thought about, you know, what kind of writing fits in the subject and which, you know, is kind of drawing on the subject but somewhere else in that. But I loved the way that you showed that the one was, you know, the physics teacher was working really with trips to the projected code, whereas the language teacher was having a different target and working more introjected. I thought that was really clear and very elegant.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I also think like you that the assignment here or the genre really that they are writing wasn't maybe not so suitable for the physics, but it was their choice. So but it would be very interesting to see it in other kind of essays. I think so too. Other genres.
I just said,
oh, sorry.
yeah, go on, you go.
No, this is just a comment, not a question, just to build off of what Lee said. I find it really interesting that you noticed this, Lee, because it's a problem that we run up against in content and language integrated learning in Spain all the time, is that the content is so often used to improve the outcomes in the foreign language rather than the foreign language being used to support students' development of their content knowledge. So it's interesting to see the same issue cropping up in different contexts like Sweden, and that it's something that you notice as well, Lee. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, well, I was just going to say something different that's related from my own experience. So my first ever lectureship job, I was given both the job of teaching language skills and the job of teaching programming. So technical and a series of writing skills, but one of them was explicitly argumentation. And so I designed this lesson that was sort of in the language world that was all about argument, and I didn't link it at all to computer science because I thought, oh, that's hard. They don't know the computer science yet. It's going to be hard for them to actually construct any kind of arguments around the computer science when they don't really understand the subject. So I took everyday subjects, and it all went horribly wrong. It's my first massive failure in teaching because it didn't work at all. And I got comments about why on earth are we being taught about this other stuff? We didn't come to university to learn about everyday stuff. And so I immediately shifted. The next year, I did that for one session, 1 year. And the next year, I shifted to basically teaching computer science in the argument. And what I did, which relates to what you were just saying, because I still wanted to teach argument, I came up with a whole series of natural topics that you could actually argue about whether this was a good language design or bad language design, or good way to write programs, bad way to write programs, that there were kind of different opinions on. And I used that instead, so that I was there I didn't think about it in these terms then, but I think what I was doing was switching to very solidly using sort of introjected routes into teaching, sort of using the argument to teach the computer science. So I came up with ways that if they were writing these essays, it was forcing them to think about the content. So I was making them learn the argument structures at the same time as actually learning the content I wanted them to learn and get a deeper insight in it. And it's not natural writing. As a professional computer scientist, you write the same kind of thing. You write reports and documentation that aren't trying to convince people, but I came up with purposes for the arguments that were definitely making them have a deeper understanding of the concepts instead of just sort of surface, oh, I'm using this way of writing a program. And I just find it's really fascinating because it's just given me a completely new way of thinking about what I was doing 20 years ago that I never really worked out in these terms at all what was going on with it. I just had this instinctive, that didn't work. It didn't work because I was teaching the wrong subject. I've got to just focus on computer science. And in doing so, I think it's also going back to the discipline literacy rather than what I was doing before, was teaching them argument completely outside the discipline literacy, and it just didn't inspire them at all. I got nowhere with it. But and that sort of it's kind of interesting because I was explicitly trying to fill both of your roles. It was me as one person filling both of those roles, and originally I assumed they were separate roles, and very quickly found I had to integrate with myself. I had to talk to myself about it, in effect, not just see it as two separate things that I was doing.